I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we have the entire board here and our mayor, general manager, and our legal counsel. Revisions and deletions to the agenda. We're going to adjust the agenda to allow Scott to go first. So we're going to take item 9 first, then we'll resume the agenda. Well, let me get the consent agenda done first. Do we have any changes to the consent agenda, or do I have a motion to accept it?
Motion to accept the consent agenda.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay. So now we'll move on to item 9 and then come back to item 5 afterwards. Scott, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us why you're here?
Sure. I work with the Delaware Geological Survey at the University of Delaware. I've been there since 1984, so it's been a long tenure. By training, I am a hydrogeologist, specializing in subsurface conditions, but have a substantial research portfolio in watershed hydrology and biogeochemistry as well. I'm joining you today because Darren invited me to come down, be available to answer questions, give a brief presentation on a few of the issues that are facing the town of Lewis right now with respect to water resources. It's been a busy week for Lewis for me because I was also sitting in on a planning department thing as well, associated with resource protection areas. So it seems like the town has its hands full with water resources issues right now. So I have a brief set of slides to share with you, and I think Darren is, or somebody's put them up for me. And mostly I'm here to answer questions because frankly, there's such a broad array of things. I can't possibly cover everything in one presentation or in a very short period of time. So I'll do the best I can with this. Some of you are familiar with Delaware Geological Survey. We are a branch of state government organized at the University of Delaware. We have a state budget, but we are all university employees and do our work from there because our mission is research, service, and exploration for earth resources in the state. First thing I'll bring to your attention, some of you probably have already seen what one of the outcomes of what we do. We publish our results and distribute them free of charge to whoever wants them. There's a website, web presence, everything is self-service now, although we can send them to you. We generally put them out for everybody to consume. I put these 3 titles up as we're on the second slide now. Would it help if I shared my screen rather than do this by asking to change the slides?
Sure. Go ahead.
Let me do that.
Fine.
You got to let me do it.
Darren, you've got to stop sharing your screen first, and then Scott can share his.
I just made you host, Scott. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Thank you. This will make it so much better. There's a view of the Grand Canyon. All right, so. All right, so I put the covers of 3 publications that are pertinent to your situation. One is about wellhead protection area delineations for Lewis-Rehoboth area. The other one I've been getting questions about groundwater recharge potential mapping. And then the third one up there, just to show something more recent and in your neighborhood, did an extensive analysis of geology, hydrology, and groundwater quality at Cape Henlopen State Park associated with their wastewater treatment. There was a lot of review of data from that, from the region, and assessment of hydraulic conditions there. So now let's jump into one of the other ones, water table mapping products. This is a good place to organize and try to bring your attention to some of the issues that you've raised about hydrology in the Lewis area. We created a digital elevation model of the water table for Sussex County and actually the whole state, the whole coastal plain portion of Delaware. So that's roughly 90% of the state. This was done 15 years ago. The elevation model is a 30 meter grid with a resolution of 1 vertical foot. And it's a combination of statistics, geostatistics, and observations. And you're on the right-hand side is the zoom into the Lewis area. You probably recognize the canal and the major roads coming through there. This is showing depth to water table, probably normal conditions. Depth to water table in feet. The part that is probably of concern is where the water table is very shallow. So that's everything, most everything east of the canal. This is intimately tied to the issue of sea level rise. And sea level rise is something that's been measured since 1900 at Breakwater Harbor in Lewis at a National Ocean Service Class 1 tide station. And so they've been measuring there, and they can determine a rate of rise for that period since 1900. And it is measurable and it is significant. So what is that? Why is that important to Lewis? And I'll go into a little more detail on these things. Is that as sea level rises, the depth to water table will decrease. It'll get shallower. And the result of this is that the water table will flood land surface more frequently during storms and high tides. I'll show you some examples of how we know that happens. The other piece of this is that the increased sea level puts more force on the saltwater side of the system and pushes saltwater inland or to underneath of Delaware. And this we call this saltwater intrusion in generic terms. And this can happen laterally in the subsurface. And it can also happen from the top down. And the top down one is what happens when there is a extreme storm or high tide event that brings salty water over land surface. Some of that can, in some cases, infiltrate into the shallow aquifer. Balancing the salt against salt water is freshwater head, right? So freshwater pushing oceanward and bayward maintains a steady pressure on salt water and keeps it at bay for the most part. So it's important to maintain freshwater head to keep the salt water out. So here are the 3 sea level rise planning scenarios accepted by the state's Sea Level Rise Committee. These get updated every few years. And this graph starts with data somewhere around 2010, goes out to 2100. And there are 3 scenarios, a low, medium, and high, or low, intermediate, and high. And it shows you what the head changes will be, or sea level changes will be under those 3 projections. At the very bottom, there's what has been fit to the Breakwater Harbor tide station, approximately 3.42 millimeters per year, or 0.011 feet per year is the local rise rate for Lewis. And since 1919, that's 1.1 feet change has been measured. You'll notice these curves are not linear, they are exponential. And these go along with climate modeling, where they can do future climate predictions based on CO2 concentrations and melting of the ice caps on the North and South poles. Mostly the South Pole is the biggest. The Antarctica ice sheet is the one that will have the biggest impact on sea level rise globally. So how does this impact groundwater and the town of Lewis in particular? On the left-hand side, here's a cartoon of the typical setting for a unconfined aquifer, which is present under Lewis, where you have fresh water pushing out from left towards the right towards the ocean. You have salt water wedged underneath the fresh water. This is a buoyancy effect. Fresh water is less dense than salt water and floats on top. And there's a mixing zone in between. And so you can, this one shows a simple unconfined aquifer. This picture can be repeated at depth with confined aquifers as well. And you can have stacked layers of fresh and salty water. And we do in Delaware. It's something that we have observed. So on the right-hand side, move this, whoops, of this picture, there's the 3 sea level rise scenarios, and it gives the water table rise in feet. I gotta push this out of the way. For the low scenario, 1.5 feet by 2100, the water table will rise 0.6 feet at a distance of 0.6 miles inland from there, roughly a kilometer. And the bottom graph shows how the three different sea level rise scenarios translate into water table rise in feet over the next 80 years. So it starts off relatively slow and not a whole lot to notice until about 2050 to 2060, where the exponential part of the curve really has an impact on groundwater conditions in Delaware. You can look at this a different way. Whoop, wrong way. Right, so here we're going to look at it as a cross-section from the coastline inland, from a distance 0 to 30,000 feet inland. And it shows the 3 sea level rise curves, orange being high and yellow being low. And it shows how far inland the sea level rise will be seen and what the magnitude is. So for example, if we're looking at the high curve, the sea level rise will be approximately 1 foot, 30,000 feet, or 5.5 miles inland. The 1 foot, 1.5 foot rise, the low one, it has a relatively minor impact at a distance of about 4 miles from the coastline. But Lewis is all within that 10,000 foot window from 0 to 10,000 feet. So no matter what sea level rise scenario you pick, there will be a rise of at least 1.5 feet right at the coast, and 0.5 foot as much as 5 miles inland. And this work has not been released as a publication yet. It was done by Tom McKenna and Changming He, both colleagues of mine at Delaware Geological Survey. The research is all done. They're just making the publication look acceptable for release to the public. I don't have a date on that yet. So now, how do we monitor? Right in the town of Lewis, we had been monitoring 2 sites. One at the power plant. That's what we call NI 4215 as the well identifier. I believe the well is still there. That well is in a confined aquifer, same one that's used by the city. And then further inland at the library area, there are 2 wells finished, one in the confined aquifer that Lewis uses and one above that. And then at the very bottom of the map, the Lewis well field, the 2 brown dots over there under where it says the moorings. Okay, so if we look at the data from NI 5211, that well's about 80 feet deep. And you look at average annual groundwater levels, I have them plotted on the right-hand side in there. You can fit a statistically significant line to that. It shows a rate of sea level rise about 0.017 feet per year. So it's a little larger than the sea level rise being measured in the harbor. I would make this caveat. Our monitoring frequency at the site is only quarterly now. And so we're not really picking up the full range of observations to get a true average. But what is remarkable is that we are within a factor of 2 with groundwater rise. So that's within a factor of 2 of sea level rise measured at the coast. So in a way, I would say, yeah, it looks like sea level rise is impacting groundwater here in Lewis on a time frame of since 1985. So now what does this mean for short-term events? So here's a view of what happened on the left during Tropical Storm or Hurricane Irene. I can't remember what it was. The blue is the tide line. The black is the groundwater level in a shallow observation well that was located just off of the marsh upland interface. The red line is ground surface. And so during Irene, there's a lot of rain associated with it. The groundwater level rose at the same rate as the tide. And in fact, the groundwater level popped out above ground surface for a period of about 3 hours on August 28th, 2011. And then went down below ground surface, and tide never really reached that particular monitoring well at that location. When we looked at the salinity signature at that well, we never really saw salt water in that well from that event. So now on the right-hand side, same well, but this was during a lunar high tide in 2012, the peak around June 5th. And you can see the groundwater level in black, tide in blue. You can see that tide is significantly higher than groundwater throughout most of this period during the high tides. And in this situation, we saw salt water in this well. So we had saltwater intrusion happening because it was not, the tide level was not above land surface. This was a lateral intrusion kind of event where it was moving through the subsurface to this well. So this was the first time we had the observations made at this frequency to be able to look at the phenomenon at this kind of time scale. But now we've repeated this experiment in several other locations in Sussex and Kent County since then, and we are seeing similar things repeat wherever we look. Lunar high tides bring the tide up, and I know Lewis already faces flooding on some roads out towards the beach from that. But there is an associated groundwater signature with that, and groundwater in some cases will exceed ground surface. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that process about sea level rise and groundwater response to you. I don't know if all of you or any of you had ever seen anything like that before. And that was all I had for a formal presentation for you. And the rest of it, I was just going to try to answer your questions.
I just have a question for clarification. It's Robert Kennedy, Scott.
Sure.
Early in your presentation, you talked about what I'm going to put it in my layman's terms, flooding having a pressure effect on causing salt water to move down or laterally. Is that an elastic effect? Once the tides recede and the flooding abates, what happens at that point? Is it once it's the salt water moves, does it stay there, or does it kind of go back and forth depending upon the pressure on the ground surface?
There are a few different ways that the story can go, right? There is, you always have that balance between fresh and salt water, and freshwater pressure pushing salt water out. So as long as the freshwater pressure exceeds the saltwater pressure, if you have a storm event that brings salt water in overland, it will never really infiltrate because the fresh water is pushing it out. So as the salt water recedes, you will rarely see a signature of salt in the shallow groundwater. However, if the salty water head, the pressure of the salt water exceeds that of the groundwater, it will infiltrate into the ground and then move downward and then disperse through the shallow aquifer. Because salt water is denser than fresh water, they don't mix in a big way. Salt water tends to maintain a bubble kind of process and displace the fresh water out of its way. One of the analogies I've heard that resonates with me is a lava lamp, right? You think of how that behaves. That's how it works. There's been plenty of experiments in the field and in simulation that show that phenomenon happening as you drop salty water into the ground on top of a freshwater aquifer. Is that you set up the lava lamp in the ground. Then gradually over time, as freshwater pressure and normal groundwater flow conditions happen, it'll gradually push that back out towards the bay or the ocean.
Thanks,
That's-
Scott. I'll
that's
remember
the
the
general
lava.
process.
Tom, you look like you want to say something. You're
We
muted.
got,
Tom Panetta,
there's,
you're muted.
I was gonna say there's two things. So there's a question in the queue from Sumner, and I think Rick Quill has his hand raised.
I've got, so Tom Panetta, I think you had your lips moving. I don't know if you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, Scott, before we get to the other questions, can you talk a little bit about the regulation for protecting excellent recharge and the significance of protecting the excellent recharge on Lewis Beach relative to the impact on our wells, which, you know where they're located right off of Kings.
In terms of how the state manages those two resources or those resource protection areas, they are separate. Wellhead protection areas are there to protect water quality in public water wells. Recharge protection is set to protect both quantity and quality of water in a watershed kind of approach, right? And it has applications across multiple state regulatory initiatives associated with contamination, stormwater, drainage, right? So all these things are directly related to groundwater and recharge. One of the things that's particular to the Lewis situation and excellent recharge areas, the amount of fresh water that you can maintain east of the canal and will have a direct bearing on the movement of salt water into the shallow subsurface in that part of town. Why is that important? There's a bunch of reasons, right? From an infrastructure standpoint, things that used to sit in freshwater when the water table aquifer was fresh will now be sitting in salt water. So think about all your buried utilities of all types, right? Were they built to withstand saltwater submergence or were they built for freshwater? There's one issue that I know Delmarva Power is paying particular attention to. It will also impact, so anything buried, any buried metal will have a different chemical reactivity once it's immersed in salty water. The other issue is more feathers and fur, I would call it, right? And plants. The environment on the east side of the canal with the extensive marshes over on the bordering the canal and behind the dunes, right? They're all in tune with the current hydrology with a lot of freshwater discharge from those from the shallow aquifer into them. And if you make that all salty, you're going to have a much different looking town, right? One of the first things you will probably notice is that all the freshwater plants will disappear and you will probably be overrun with Phragmites, right? Because Phragmites can stand salt and there's a lot of plants that cannot. So if you don't have an active Phragmites control program now, you bring a lot of salty water in from whatever mechanism, you're going to have a much different looking town. So those are the two main things
appreciate
when I think about recharge, the recharge mapping, recharge protection as it's implemented by the state and many other local governments. It's not always clear why they do it. The two wellheads and recharge are completely different. And at Lewis, the recharge area east of the canal has no impact on your wellhead area. That's a whole nother animal with a whole different set of controls.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say then is that the saltwater intrusion aspect into our well fields, you're not particularly concerned that the excellent recharge area east of the canal impacts that?
Correct. There's a hydraulic barrier between the two, and that is the Lewis and Rehoboth Canal.
And even though the canal is that shallow, that acts as a barrier?
It is a sea level drain, right? And so that is the lowest point for fresh water to be controlled. That's the lowest control point for fresh water on Delmarva is sea level.
Mhm.
So if you have a sea level drain, that's where all the fresh water wants to go. Now you can cover up the drain with material that's less permeable and cause the point of exit to be different, but still the hydraulic control is sea level on that.
And along those lines, since the canal is brackish, I mean, it's tidal, is there any concern with the increasing level hydraulic head of the canal impacting the groundwater under it?
Yeah, it's something to be cognizant of and having in mind for a longer term plan for the town. The town used to have its well field right there by the power plant with wells near the canal, and most of them were rendered useless during the buildup of population at World War II. And that's kind of the impetus that moved Lewis's well field inland, but also moved Rehoboth's well field inland. They had their original well field near the canal. And when World War II came about and all those people were at Fort Miles, water use went up and all those wells were rendered salty because they were too close.
The other question, the drawdown rate of our wells, does it impact the saltwater migration? The cone of depression?
We are not seeing any impact of your wells on the observation points that are available to us.
Okay, that's good news.
But you know, if you go back and think about that well field, and there is a drainage way that comes in from the north.
Yeah, the Canary
Right.
Creek side.
It's connected to Canary Creek, a sea level drain and a source of salt water in the future, right? So as sea level rises, it's going to come in from that direction. How that plays out with the well field is unknown at this point. But yeah, just the canal is not really the worrisome thing to me for the town's water supply. It's more that other drainage way coming in from the north that's associated with Canary Creek.
So what would your recommendations be to BPW to ensure that we have as long of a term lookout for potential problems?
There's a variety of things that can be done. For me, to come up with a recommendation for BPW, I'd have to hear what your appetite is for looking at it, right? None of it's cheap, and you're looking at a long-term kind of issue that's happening slowly and sometimes episodically. So if you try to do things cheaply, there's a really good chance you'll never see anything happening till it's too late. If you start too soon with your effort to look for it, you'll burn through a lot of money potentially before you ever find anything or find that sign that big changes are imminent. So I'm kind of, at this point, I'm not sure what I would recommend. You got a couple ways to go with that. Neither of them particularly attractive to solving a problem at the current time. But there's plenty of instrumentation available. The cost is coming down every year. The actual equipment to do it is less of an issue cost-wise than it is the maintenance of that equipment and managing the information that comes out of it. The reason I say that, I manage a program at Delaware Geological Survey that has 160 wells around the state. Most of them have instrumentation, sensors making observations every 15 minutes, right? We are generating 3.5 million observations a year. It's not trivial. It's a substantial investment of time and money to both run it and maintain it, and then to actually pay attention to what's coming out, right? I would say that on Delmarva, people in the engineering consulting businesses are just feeling their way into this issue right now and don't really have a good handle on how to do it or how much it's going to cost. The state government relies on us at Delaware Geological Survey to advise them on these kinds of issues. And they're going into it slowly as well because it is a substantial investment in infrastructure and people to take care of this and make sure you do something with the information once you have it. In my experience, there's almost nothing worse than collecting a whole lot of information and then just putting it in a file cabinet and forgetting to look at it and use it for real purposes. So yeah, right now it's kind of tough.
Scott,
I don't have
you and
good
I had
advice.
talked a little bit. Is there anything the BPW could do to help add collection points, or do you feel like we're covered with test wells as you need to see?
So yeah, the one part that's not monitored right now is the shallow groundwater associated with that Canary Creek tributary, right? That's not looked at all, or or the creek itself. It's not looked at. I could tell you that we've been looking at pressure and salinity at a number of head of tide stations up and down Delaware Bay. And we do see salt water all the way up to most of the mill pond dams during high tide, during the king tide of the month. It happens, right? Depending on how far that stream reach, how long the stream reach is between the bay and the mill pond dam, it will drive how much salinity we get. But say, are you familiar with, what's the one there? Just south of Smyrna. I want to say it's not Massey's Mill Pond. It's, drawing a blank. We'll go farther north, Lake Como, right in Smyrna, right? Mill Creek. It's several miles to the nearest big tidal tributary. But right there at Mill Creek, we see salty water happen once a month. That's of interest to the town of Smyrna because they have a well field right next to it. And right now they're not having any issues in their well field. But when the salinity events increase to more than once per month, they may start seeing a problem there.
Scott, our present well field, how do you assess our present location for our wells? I mean, is there any need for us to start looking further out to obtain land for future wells, or do you think that's what you were mentioning earlier? It's just too expensive to.
So now what I would tell you is that there's plenty of water, right? And this is something I heard from one of the former engineers at Artesian Water. He said, there's plenty of water. There always will be plenty of water. It's just how much is it going to cost to treat it?
Right.
Right. You're not going to run out of water where you are. And the issues you may try to alleviate by moving to another location, you'll pick up additional risks from pollution from land, from what's happening on the land above it.
Yeah.
So you got plenty of water where you are. Where would you go? You'd have to get away from any, away from any potential source of salt water to avoid that issue. But then you will pick up other issues that would be associated with pollution from gas stations, wastewater, fertilizer, on and on it goes, right?
So really what we need to be looking at or considering in the future, and it's not, I would not say near future, but perhaps distant, is that we need to be prepared to increase our water purification system and or water quality issues at the treatment plant itself. So it may be desalinization to a point. It may be something like that. I don't want, please listen. I'm not raising any alarms. We're okay. For the
I
next
think we all feel a little bit
I don't
alarmed.
see
by the
this
way.
happening for
Yeah.
10 years at least. Don't anybody run from here saying, oh, we've got a water quality issues. We still have the best water in Delaware. We have 200 parts per million total dissolved solids, equal to what you would put in bottled water. And that's what's coming to your homes through your faucets. And so,
Right. That's a very, very important point. I hate, I always have to kick myself or pinch myself not to become too alarmist. But you guys are egging me on. And so I'm trying to be honest with you about what the risks are. But right now you do have an outstanding source of water. And there, in terms of monitoring your existing source of water, there are instruments that can be inserted in line, right, in your pump, in your well discharges that will give you a salinity value, right? So they've done that in Bethany Beach, and they don't have problems. But what they have seen with that is as they ramp up production in the summer, the concentrations of salt increase. It's not rocket science, right? It makes perfect sense given the physics of the situation where they get their water.
Aaron, I think we have questions out there.
we do.
Yes.
I've got several questions. If I can read them off to you,
Sure,
Scott.
go ahead.
And then we had someone with a hand up and we'll get to them as well. This is from Summer Crosby. It says, as a member of the Sea Level Rise group of the Planning Commission, we expect a higher frequency of flooding events through time, perhaps like what Scott has shown. Should we expect higher rates of saltwater interaction with our wells as the flood frequency increases through time? I think you may have already addressed that, but do you have anything else to add?
No, I think, it's a very pertinent question to what I was saying. Yeah, that's exactly on point. It's just that the time frame for that to happen is uncertain.
Next question, again from Sumner, says, might this lateral flood-based saltwater intrusion be an issue for placement of a new well off of New Road? And I don't know that that's really for Scott. That might be for the board.
Yeah, I don't know where the new well location is, how close it is to the marsh or to a body of salt water, but it's always something to have in mind as you design.
I will take and I'll share with you where that is and we can do that offline.
Okay, wonderful.
From Charlie O'Donnell, he said, Scott, there was an old production well for the Cape Henlopen State Park that was monitored for salt chloride concentrations after it was taken out of service for domestic water supply. It was located on the bay side of the canal. Do you know if that well is still available for monitoring of the saltwater shelf?
Now, the short answer, no, I don't know. It's one of those mysteries. It's on state park land, and state parks personnel have been less than forthcoming about the eventual disposition of that well. I've heard that we would hear one time that it's been sealed up, and then other time, oh no, it's still there. So I don't know. And we gave up trying to work with parks because we could never get a straight answer out of them.
Righty. Given the change, this is from Sumner again, given the changes in land use in and around the Lewis wellhead protection area, as well as possible changes in withdrawals at the field, is it time to rerun the WHPA delineation? Tom Panetta, you might have a thought on that.
I don't know. I mean,
So is it time? The way this is it's a philosophical issue. Are you a scientist, engineer, or are you somebody that's spending money, right? The people that do groundwater modeling would say that the model is not something that you run once and put it up on the shelf and never do it again. It's something that has a lot of information and capability to generate new information built into it. So from that perspective, yes, it should be run again with updated water use information, because that's certainly changed since that model was run nearly 20 years ago. There have been substantial changes in land cover. There's a lot more impervious surface out there. What that will change is the source area for the water getting into your well field. It doesn't necessarily, won't make a big change in how much water is available. It's just going to change the area of contribution. I know that over the years, there's been a lot of discussion about that, because both the well field and the zone area of contribution are outside of town limits. So it's in the county, and the county's not interested in helping out with protection of that resource. So I don't know how much of that has changed with where the town is, what's town line is right now, and what can be done. But I know that, you know, a lot of development has happened and things have changed. Is it enough to spend tens of thousands of bucks to redo that exercise? I don't know. I don't know if it will really change how the town does business, or how BPW views its well field, or what the county would respond to if we did come up with something new that was of concern regarding development.
This is Earl Webb. Can I ask a question, or are there other people in line at this point? here?
We've answered, what I have is we've answered all the questions, and the one hand that was raised has been taken down. Here it comes back up.
Yeah, you had Stephen Cahill and Rick Quill were the two that had their hands up.
And Stephen Cahill's hand just came back up, but Earl, please go first.
Go ahead, Earl.
Okay, just to put this out there, you know, is there any other town or entity in any way that uses our aquifer, or is it just us at this point? And the reason I asked the question is there an opportunity to work with other people, because we all would have a similar vested interest in the aquifer?
Right. So when you go back to the publications that I showed up front, right, that Lewis wellhead protection area delineation was done along with delineations for Rehoboth and Tidewater. All was done at the same time, because you guys all share the same basic resource.
Okay.
And there was a perception that you can't look at each one individually, that they're all somehow connected together. And when you look at the cover, you know, you look at the wellhead protection areas, they do come pretty close to each other, right? There is the wellhead protection areas come close. And then the other thing to keep in mind about wellhead protection areas, they are 5-year time of travel from a point in the well to a point on land surface somewhere. The water, if you compare the eventual capture zone of each of those well fields, they're much larger, right? If you look at Lewis's capture zone versus the 5-year time of travel wellhead protection area, the capture zone is 5 to 10 times bigger. I can't remember exactly how big it is. I believe that number is in the report. So yeah, it would make sense to redo, you know, if you're going to do Lewis, you would redo all of them again.
So definitely advantages in working together with that group. And I know when we purchased our house here, we had a study done on the water level. And as a result, we took that advice and actually added 2 feet of concrete to the basement. It's not as big of a basement, but the idea is that it'll be safer from a water level perspective, at least coming up through the ground.
That was a wise move. This year I gotten about two calls a month on people with wet basements in Sussex County.
Yeah.
It's been trying for them.
I'm sure.
I have a question, Tom. I wasn't here on board. Our well fields, talk about the county. The county has already approved about 100% development around our well fields. So do you have any kind of information or whatever that can tell us what we might expect from the kind of development that's going on there?
In general, yes, right? Whatever people do and whatever products people use in their homes, in their yards, some of it tends to wind up on the ground and could be in your, eventually be in the water that your wells pump out. So I'm always an advocate for monitoring the quality of the water out of the wells. A cheaper proxy for that is to measure the quality of the water exiting the well field, the untreated water exiting the well field, right? And within the state of Delaware, the Office of Drinking Water takes that approach. They monitor water quality in the water systems and usually at the point of entry to the distribution system. To have a more proactive look at protecting yourselves and your customers from problems, you would look at this at a higher frequency and with additional things to test for. This is not cheap, right? And so you need to have a qualified, educated person that's familiar with all the different, what contaminant du jour are you worried about? Help you through this process of both collecting the samples properly and then interpreting the results you get back out of it. You will get some help from Office of Drinking Water on the health effects of these things and maybe even a list of chemicals to test. And then the DENREC water supply section will have some technical input on what does it mean in terms of where it might be coming from. You can ask myself or my colleagues at Delaware Geological Survey the same kinds of questions about the hydrology and hydrogeology of what you're finding. So there are resources that you can rely on for technical assistance, but the actual work itself, collecting samples and paying for the analyses, that's going to be on the town and your customers.
Scott, one of the graphs that you put up early on was showing the impact of king tides, tropical storm Irene on the saltwater interface. Would it be worthwhile that we did our wellhead testing more coincident with those events or supplemented our testing so we could see the impact in the well field?
Great question. So now a little context will help answer that, right? The illustration I did was of a well that was 5 feet deep, right? 8 feet deep, maybe at most. 20 feet away from the marsh, right? Your wells in your well field are 100 to 150 feet deep. And right now are hundreds of feet away from the swampy area that's connected to the salty Canary Creek. So the timing of what we're seeing with our field experiments is very short-term and short-lived, right? We have not done that experiment looking at well fields adjacent. I could tell you where we are looking in the Dover area right now. We see the same thing in terms of close by, and it could, the salty water can get down 20, 30 feet in a hurry. But in many places, we're not seeing it deeper than that, even where there's big amounts of production, high pumping rates. So each site is not unique, but the hydraulic and hydrologic characteristics of every well field is different, and you cannot say. So for what should Lewis do? If you were really worried about the risk of salt water, right, you would do that experiment like we did and have a shallow observation well with sensors at the north end of the well field nearest the swamp, or you'd have a sensor in the swamp, right? I wouldn't recommend that for the town to take on. That's more of a science project than it is appropriate for a small water utility like Lewis. But I would say that, you know, sensors in your production wells, would be a reasonable investment to consider in the next 5-year planning horizon. Come up with a way of doing that and incorporating that into how you manage your well field.
We've had a couple people, we've had one gentleman with his hand raised. Scott, I believe you are the host right now. If you can answer that, and then I think we need to be moving on. Press, do you agree with that?
Yeah. Right.
Sure.
Yes.
And Darren, just one note, I believe at some point, if Scott can hand off host duties back to you, I believe the way Zoom works is if the host logs off, the rest of us go with him. So we may want to
would be
make sure
good.
that happens,
All right.
that handoff happens.
Right, I'm looking for that setting to relinquish control here.
Take your hand and run it right over your own photo. Upper right corner, you'll see 3 dots. Click on those 3 dots.
Yep.
And if you want to hand me back the hosting,
it's not doing it. Let me try a different one.
actually what you do is you're going to take and put, I believe your host, you take and run it over my picture, the 3 dots in the upper right corner. Click on that.
Gotcha. That's what I had to do.
Make me host.
It's back to you.
All right, there we go.
Darren, if we have had people that have had their hands up for a while, let's get their questions, then
We have one.
not get any more.
Here's Steve Cahill. Mr. Cahill, are you able to hear us and speak?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, Scott. How you doing? It's been a long time.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I'm Steve Cahill. I'm with Duffield Associates. And to give you a little background, I have a client who's interested in developing a property on Lewis Beach, of course, between the canal and the bay. And I want to go off and discuss the Lewis Code regarding the excellent recharge area requirements there.
Press, I don't know if that's what this is the place for that or not.
No, this isn't the place for that. That's the city code. You'd have to bring that up with the city.
Okay. Well, the Board of Public Works is involved in that code if you in terms of water management agreements that are required and so forth. But that's fine.
Thank you. Anything else, Darren?
That's it. That was the only hand we had.
Scott, thank you so much. This was really informative.
Yeah, very good.
You answered a lot of questions really very clearly too, for us non-technical geotechnical people. So
I'm glad you found it useful. And if you need me again, just give a holler.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Bye-bye.
All right, we'll resume with the item 5, the receive Infomark report.
I believe I've just made Mike Wogemuth. You're a member of the panel. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you very much. We can't see you, but we can hear you. Board members, do you have any questions on the Infomark report that you'd like to have in specifics? We may want to move this along fairly quickly.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about what was found when they did the inspections of the screens?
Yeah, so we had one sales rep. Well, we had the sales representative for the for bracket green screens and light packer come in beginning of February, and he did see significant wear. So he brought back one of his colleagues that's was able to do more of an inspection and is preparing a report with some quotes. And he was just in this past Friday, and we were expecting those reports and quotes this week. So he did, notice that there is wear, and it is significant. So we're going to have more information this week, and I will get together with Darren once we have those reports and go over them.
And when you say wear, is this wear allowing bypassing around the screens? Is the
I don't
seal-
think that's the case. I think well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think that has serious impact to what we're seeing accumulate on the filters.
Oh, okay.
They may have a better, we asked for any kind of upgrade to what's existing to remove more of those fibrous materials.
Okay, because that was the crux. That was one of the main purposes of the inspection was look at how the fibrous material was getting through. So,
Mike, go ahead, Tom.
yeah, no, that's it.
No, it seems like filter train number 4 seems to be a problem child. Is that just my imagination? I see that popping up quite a bit. I don't know.
Well,
something about that train that's different.
I'm not sure the history of train 4. I know that previously that membrane, that train was in standby. So when there's not enough demand, there's not enough flow for all 4 trains to be online, train 4 would go into standby. And that was how it was set when we took over in November, and we continued to operate that way. We pulled train 4 and found that the aeration diffusers were clogged.
Remember that.
So we unclogged the aeration diffusers. We did a chlorine recovery clean on train 4, and we did an acid recovery clean on train 4, and we are in the middle of manually cleaning train 4. So we have 1 cassette fully cleaned. We'll have the second cassette finished and back in on Friday, and pulled in the 3rd cassette next week. So we are finding that there's a lot of the fibrous debris collecting on the membranes. The chemical cleanings did a good job in removing a lot of it. It's just very time consuming. There's 40 modules in each cassette, and we have to, so it's labor intensive, time consuming. So it does take, I mean, even if it only takes 20 minutes to clean each module, it takes about, an additional 10 to 15 minutes to pull them and replace them. So we're getting better at it, getting faster at it. We're gonna fabricate a second rack so we could clean two modules at a time. But it's time consuming. So we'll have 4 cleaned. We figure we'll have all 3 trains, or all 3 cassettes in train 4 cleaned by the end of next week. And then we're going to move right to train 1, because the TMP has increased in train 1. And at the end of last week, we pulled all three correct cassettes in train 1 and cleaned the diffusers out. And the diffusers were also, the aeration diffusers were also clogged. So the aeration diffusers, they allow air to, or bubbles up from the bottom, and it's supposed to shake the biological debris and other debris off the membranes.
Right.
So now that we know that this is an issue with the trains having the diffusers being clogged, it's something that we're going to be much more vigilant about pulling and cleaning these diffusers. And I think part of the issue was that having to hire mixed liquors in the trains and the bioreactors, they were more susceptible to clogging. these
Yeah.
diffusers.
So Mike, is it, are we continuing with the process that when the demand is down, that we're always taking train? Or are we, is it better strategy to equalize the wear between the modules, between the trains?
That's a better strategy. The issue was, the reason that train 4 would go into standby is it had the least amount of air entrapment issues. So the air entrapment a lot of times causes a filter that's been offline for several hours. It would fail to come back online. So we did install air relief valves on all 4 filters. We just got those installed on Monday. So there were existing air relief valves, but they were on the process side of the pump, and we installed air relief valves on the effluent side of the permeate pumps. So we're hoping that alleviates some of our area issues. But yes, the goal is for us to have that standby filter be on a rotation, so they do wear equally and they get fouled equally.
There was a comment in the report about you had a health and safety audit, and that there were audit items that were going to be addressed. You just talk high level. I mean, what the issues were?
They were all smaller stuff, Tom.
Okay.
We addressed all this. Well, most of the big stuff was addressed by White Marsh since the third party audit. So our health and safety advisor came down and you know, there were no critical issues that you know, we would have corrected anything critical immediately. It was smaller stuff, which we've been correcting little stuff as, you know, as we have time.
Any other questions for Mike?
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Mike, this doesn't have anything to do with the wastewater treatment plant, but Infomark, I believe, is going to be doing some higher level observation of our water production facilities. Are there any issues that you've found that haven't been discussed with Darren?
Yeah, we haven't got into the water treatment facility at all at this time. You know, besides for the due diligence, we did a visit prior to our contract being agreed upon. I mean, we are available and we have you know, expertise, you know, throughout our company that we can, you know, consult with, and any questions you guys may have. I believe we were to offer our computerized maintenance management system to the water plant. I think that was part of the agreement, that we were going to add work order tasks. Is that correct? Or it might have been the data management system that we used, that we were going to add water plant data to.
Mike, on the effluent nutrient loading, it's sheet 8, I guess. Is the nitrogen and phosphorus, the fact that it's rising, is that just because of the way the statistics are done, or was that real?
It is. So we are required to collect 1 sample a month for the constituents and total nitrogen, and 1 sample a month for phosphorus. So we take a sample at the beginning of the month, and if we're under the limit, you know, we don't resample. Now we do sample every day and run our own process analyses. So everything that goes, that's all the data we use for the permit, and the data I put in the report is analyzed by a contract lab. So, but we do our own process analyses every day for ammonia, total nitrogen, and orthophosphate. So we can track where we're at. They're not acceptable analyses, procedures, per DNREC, but we can track daily where we're at on total nitrogen and orthophosphate, which we is how we track the total phosphorus. So we can add more chemical, more alum to bring the phosphorus down at any time. But if we're not, if we're within our permit parameters, we don't do that. So the same with the total nitrogen. We have a chemical that's called micro C, and that facilitates the microorganisms that we call the denitrifiers to remove nitrate from the wastewater and release nitrogen gas into the atmosphere. So we actually have been adding more micro C to pull the total nitrogen down, because at the beginning of February, our total nitrogen result was above an 8. So we resampled last Wednesday, we collected another sample, and the second result was a 6. So it averages out to a 7, and we report our average monthly result. So we can control and will control the levels of the nutrients to stay within permit ranges.
And thanks a lot for that. There's a comment in here about installing a flow signal splitter to flow pace the effluent sampler as required by permit. Can you, for the geeks in us, explain what that is, or what was?
Yeah, so we get a signal from the effluent flow meter, an analog signal, and it goes to the chart recorder, it goes to the SCADA. Well, the permit, and I'm not sure if it's been in past permits, but our compliance people review the permit, and the permit requires that we take our effluent composite samples. They have to be flow paced. So they have to be, instead of just taking a sample every half an hour, you have to take a sample per so many gallons. So that's
okay.
how. So we brought somebody in to. They had to put a splitter in because there were too many instruments using that analog signal. So this is like a splitter booster. So we could use the analog signal on the composite sampler.
Okay, so it has to be an integrated volume is what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else for Mike?
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Good report, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would add that they have been pulling those, doing the physical cleaning of the filters, and done a very good job. It's a lot of work, and they're staying with it. So we appreciate that, Mike.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too,
You
Mike.
too.
Item 6, President's report. I have nothing further to report. Item 7, receive general manager's report. Darren?
I have just one thing that I would like to share, and that's the fact that we have received through WEAC the approval of the Jones Farm loan. So we're going to be receiving that the monies through the state revolving fund, and we are very grateful to the state for them doing that. And so we're in good shape.
We also received the RP3 for another 3 years.
Oh, you want to explain that too?
So long story short, we did it in 2000, I believe it was 2017. It basically looks at 3 different areas. It looks at your funding, it looks at your total reliability, your safety. And it's a very long process. You have to fill out and ask a bunch of questions. You have to have supporting documents. You submit it to APPA, which is a national organization, and then they judge you over the course of about, I'm going to say 8 to 10 months. They'll ask for supporting data. They'll come up with, further questions, and then they grade you. We received a pretty decent grade for the size utility we are. And again, that goes back to our guys. We have a small crew, but we're very efficient. We're very effective, and they keep the lights on. It's reliable.
And Austin has done a very good job of just getting the stuff, all information transmitted to the APPA so they could make their decisions.
So congratulations on all that.
I've got one follow-on. I recently was copied on an email from a director of the Cape Shores Homeowners Association. He was thanking the BPW for clearing up the undergrowth around a sewer lift station on the property. And I just wanted to add my well done and hope the information gets transmitted back to the people who actually did the work.
Thank you very much. And we
Yep,
will
thank
definitely
you.
share that with staff.
All right, Darren, you want to, anything else to report?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. We're into presentations, and so we've already had number 8. So we'll go to item 9, presentation of options provided through the Delaware Municipal Electric Corporation, DMAC, and AMP representatives for possible AMI automated metering infrastructure installation for Lewis. And I think we have Scott Lynch of DMAC there.
We have 2 folks. Scott, we'll let you introduce yourself. We also have Brandon Podney, who is with us. So Scott, if you want to kind of introduce them, and then we'll get going.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Scott Lynch from DMAC, here tonight to bring you a presentation on AMI, Advanced Metering Infrastructure. We are providing this to you as a response from BPW staff to an interest in what we've been doing in our other various communities. Currently, right now, 2 of our members, Seaford and Milford, have already completed AMI in their communities. Town of Middletown is in the middle of it, and several of the other members are in various stages, like you, learning more about AMI and seeing what next steps would take for them to get involved. With me today is Brandon Padani from American Municipal Power. He's a program manager. He'll take you through a presentation that we've created for you. And in addition to that, some figures that we've shared with you previously about proposals that were requested. So Brandon, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and then starting the presentation.
Good, thank you, Scott.
Brandon, you're also able to share your screen.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You're also able to share your screen. We also can't hear you very well, so you'll have to speak up.
I apologize. Let me know if you can hear me a little bit better once I adjust my settings here. Give me just a moment. All right. I apologize. Can you hear me any better now? Or
Yes.
still having trouble? All right, fantastic. And can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Wonderful. So thank you, Scott Lynch, for the introduction. Again, my name is Brandon Padani. I work for American Municipal Power. We are partners with DMAC and for providing, among other things, power supply generation, electric generation, member services to utility-owned, town-owned utilities or municipal-owned utilities. And as part of that service portfolio, my role is to manage the AMI program. So as we've discussed or touched on briefly, we've been working with DMEC for quite a while, and we have 3 current deployments of our AMI program in Delaware. And so we have been asked by the BPD staff to come to you guys today to give a presentation on what our solution provides and some options available as you move down your road, down the road to an advanced meter infrastructure solution that works for you. So I won't get too much into the backgrounds of VAMP. I'd be happy to jump back into that at some point. But in short, we are a not-for-profit organization that serves 135 members across 9 states. One of those members is DMEC, and DMEC itself has individual members such as yourself. So I defer to Scott on some of the background on Delaware, but again, they're a joint action agency with several members, including Luce. The benefit of our partnership in general is the joint action, economies of scale, shared resources, not only financial shared resources, but information and best practices. And one big thing for us is mutual aid, shared resources, which if, for example, if there's a power outage in Lewis, we have resources across DEMA and across the footprint that can help you guys in a time of need. One of the main, aside from our main purpose, or the initial purpose, is power supply and generation. As we've moved on to implementing more services for our members, one of those services that we're going to talk about today is advanced metering infrastructure. In short, there's a couple of different definitions of advanced metering infrastructure, and you'll notice that DMEC's and AMP's definition is very different than the general definition you may have heard before, which is essentially in general, AMI is electric meters that are measured remotely and provide data back to consumers and utilities, which that's one aspect of AMI that's true. There are these devices in the field that measure data, record that data, and send it back to users remotely. But that is not the full definition in DMEC and AMP's perspective. In our perspective, an AMI solution for our members is a fully managed end-to-end service providing field equipment, in this case, network gear, electric water gear, and other sensors you may deploy in the future. It includes software hosting, operations and management, and also professional management, installation and integration services. And that's from the point that we're going through now, which is to the beginning conversation through deployment and onto ongoing support for a substantial term. So there are some groups of components that we will probably we'd like to discuss, or that are large groups of components that are important to how a AMI solution is delivered. The first being hardware, though that's the easiest piece to kind of recognize, because those are the things that we put in the field. You can see them, you can touch them. Those are in the traditional AMI definition, those pieces of hardware are out in the field measuring, recording data, and then sending it back to a user remotely. There's these other pieces that are less tangible. Software, we're all familiar with using different software pieces. There's a couple that are important to an AMI solution, specifically to the DMEC AMP solution that we're discussing today. That one is called the AMI head end. This piece is the piece of software that controls the communication, collection, and transmission of the data from those field devices back to the user. The next piece, the meter data management system, is in our case the piece that the EPD would use to interface and interact with the system. It is the long-term storage place for the data, and it also is the place where you would take the data from your CIS system to get a single pane of view, single pane of glass view into your system. So the meter data management takes the info from the head end in the CIS system and merges it to a single pane of glass for the utility and staff to utilize their systems. And the third group of components here are the integrations. These are the behind the scenes software and platform integrations that make the use of the software function. So there's two basic integrations, both to and from the meter data management system, the head end, which is that piece that controls the network hardware and metering devices, and also the integration to and from the consumer information system or the CIS system. From an operational perspective, the key, I think, benefit for any move to an AMI system is to move the utility in from a reactive operation to a proactive operation. So as opposed to waiting for a customer to call and say, hey, we're out of power, or instead of waiting to have the billing office say we need to have this meter reread, you'll know that information in advance. You'll know already, you'll get an automated notification if there's an outage in your system. You can, before you go to bill, there's some reports and things you can run, some predictive analytics to tell you, hey, we should go get a meter read, or we should go visit this meter because something's not right. So you're able to do proactive actions and reallocate your staff resources to value-added activities. So that is one of the operational benefits of the AMI program as we move forward. Any general questions there from an overall advanced meter infrastructure perspective or DMAC history perspective? So some differences between the DMAC AMP solution and others that you may be familiar with is that our solution is a full solution. It's designs and manages the deployment of all the AMI components. In addition, it's not just the delivery and installation of meters or the network, it's also the maintaining and monitoring of communication pieces and the applications and integrations. All of that delivery and support is within the program. The utility is not responsible for deploying any on-site or host anything outside of the service. That's handled on your behalf. Your role would be to just utilize the system for your business processes, and then troubleshoot devices on the ground in time there as needed. Additionally, as we've mentioned, this program is controlled and operated by public utilities, public power. So AMP and DMAC are not-for-profit organization, member owned. So there's a great pride there that we are purpose-built for the municipal utility systems. And,
hey, Brandon.
Brandon, this
yep.
is Scott. Would you be able to go to the presentation part about the proposals right now? I want to make sure that we get to some of the nitty-gritty of the various options that were suggested. Everyone, with some of the points that Brandon was making, we want to make sure that you have a chance to see this full presentation, but we want to make sure that we get to the requested options. What was presented to us previously was that Lewis was looking to learn a little bit more about AMI and how, looking at the system that you have right now, what could be done? Could it be a simple bolt-on that could be added to your system and you would be realizing almost everything, or the full AMI proposal? Or what would you need to do to fully implement additional components of AMI? And so what we did was we took three options. One was that, as Brandon was talking about, that meter data management system, which is the component that you interface with. It's the compartment that customers would interface with. It's the outward facing part of it. If we were just to put that one program in place, what would it do for you? And Brandon will be able to speak to that. Additionally to that, we did additional proposal. Well, what if we took, outside of what Brandon's showing right now, those 4 circles and the one red around it, if we implemented all 4 of them, I actually put the meter data management system in, the AMI head end, the communication part, and the endpoints, which is the meters themselves. What would that look like if we did a partial rollout, 25% of your system, to get an idea of test driving the system before you went all the way with it? And then what would be the other deployment if you jumped in with all 4, both feet, and you did a full 100% deployment? So there's a lot of detail about this, but I want to make sure that we do get to the crux of it. Is we did look at this from those 3 perspectives. One, if we were just to put on the meter data management system. Number 2, if we were to do just 25% deployment, that would be something around 900 of your electric and water meters. And then the full 100% would be all of your electric and all of your water meters at one time. Each of these have pros and cons with them. Brandon, if you wouldn't mind, just giving a quick overview of what each one of those is, and then so we can get to sort of the cost component of it, because I want to make sure everyone has a chance to see that, and then if any questions come up, we can touch on those, and we can get to some of these other points at a later time. So if you wouldn't mind touching on that, Brandon.
Thanks, Scott, because this was we had the advantage of seeing this in advance, so we've seen the presentation, in our own time. So this is good. I'm glad you're moving to this. If you could stay with this, we don't have to go back to the other, because I think everybody has seen and had time to review the basic information that you provided.
That sounds good. That's why we wanted to give it to you in advance, because this is a lot. There's a lot. There's a number of benefits. There's a number of components to it. So we want to make sure to give you some time to look at it. We want to concentrate on the proposals that we sent on previous. So Brandon, if you wouldn't mind focusing on getting us into this page and then getting into the meter data management system, the first option.
Sure thing. So thank you. As Scott mentioned, there's several different components, and the first option that we're going to discuss would be just deploying the right-hand side of this image, the meter data management system, and the integration. And that integration would be to your existing legacy, what we would call legacy systems, your customer information system, and your existing meter reading collection system. And so if we want to look at the cost perspective, we do there's 2 different components. There's a one-time cost and then an ongoing service cost. And so this would be to essentially keep all of the meters, water meters, electric meters you have, and reading method and reading system you have in place currently, and then adding the meter data management system software and integrations to bring that data into this software, web-based software, for you to view it, and also bring in your customer information system data so that you can begin to get your single pane of glass view into your system. This would be without deploying any new equipment in the field. So from a cost perspective, we're a one-time cost of $191,000, essentially $192,000, and then an ongoing annual service cost of approximately $70,000.
And that's important to everyone here. The meter data management system is an overlay of what you have already in place. This is not deploying any additional meters. I want to make sure that that's a very clear note. We're not changing out the meters. We're not changing out pretty much anything else. We're putting in this meter data management system, and it would be just that. and some of the functionality of just full AMI would be brought into meter data management. You would be able to look at, but you would still be subject to whatever, reading of data protocol that you currently have. You would still be subject to that. Whatever your turn on disconnects would be in place, that would still be. This is more of a, as Brandon said, a window into your system where you perhaps could do some additional analytics.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, step 2.
All right, the second option that we discussed would be deploying this meter data management system and 25% of your field devices. So it would be all of the network, AMI communications network and AMI head-end system would be deployed, and then 25% of your endpoints, meaning, like as Scott mentioned, about 900 of your electric and 900 of your water devices. And so we would begin to gain some advantages from the remote communication between advanced metering AMI devices and the meter data management system. And you'd still be reliant on the legacy or existing reading systems for the remaining 75% of your field deployments.
And that's a key part of this, that the 25% deployment is, you would essentially have two systems. You'd have one that would be running AMI, and then your existing other 75% would be whatever your current legacy is. That's a very key point. What you're installing today, technology is what it is today. So what a key point for you to think about is how quickly would you deploy the rest of that 75%? Would that be every 6 months, annually? How would you do that if you were to go with this route? I wouldn't make a recommendation that you would sit at the 25% very long. That would be something that definitely wouldn't recommend.
Scott, would it be better to go in for one utility at a time rather than both utilities 25%?
That's a great question. I'll give you a good example of that. Middletown. Middletown is going in primarily electric only right now. And they're doing a partial deployment on the water, just on a few neighborhoods that they're already that they're going to have pits already in the ground to make it easy access to for the AMI system to be put in. Reason why Middletown is doing that is they have a great number of their population with the meters inside the house. As you probably could expect, coordinating with people to get inside houses, inside basements is a chore and is difficult, and they did not want to go that route yet. However, they did want to have some of their new sections of town that they would that they were not putting the meters in the house, they're putting in pits in the development. They would get in there, and that would allow them to basically test the water side and have everything put in place for the water side when they choose to deploy that next part. So that's being done in Middletown right now.
Okay.
Yep. And conversely, Seaford and Milford did water and electric together. So it's, from our perspective, from the AMP DMEC solution, it's really your choice. Whatever works best for you is how we want to deploy it. So that's a good point. Thank you, Scott. If we look at the costs, there are a couple of different pieces to note here. There's the equipment. So there's network equipment, which are the devices that collect and send out signals to and from the system, and the field devices. And then the electric water meters and modules are in here as well. From an installation perspective, we've included our standard professional installation services here for your reference for this number of meters. And that's included as well, along with the meter data management system, software implementation, and professional fees. So this would be the initial service cost. from an ongoing perspective, we'd be looking approximately $82,000 annually.
Yeah, so you would have with this the 25%, you would get the equipment, and 25% is your current equipment. You would get associated labor to install that 25% of that equipment. And then from that point on, you have deployed 25% AMI in your community. And to have that would be these ongoing costs, as Brandon said. All right, Brandon, 100%.
Are most utilities having outside installers install the meters versus using their own employees?
We have had, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, I think everyone has used outside for doing that. I think the only one that's considering right now using internal is the Municipal Service Commission of Newcastle is considering doing the water side only under their own staff and still using outside to do the electric. Brandon, do you have anything different than that?
No, that's correct. We've deployed, this was, we are on our 8th full deployment, and all of the municipalities have used professional installation services. In some respect, mostly all of the electric has been professional installed, and the majority of water, except as Scott mentioned, the one exception would be Newcastle is considering doing the water themselves. But professional installations has been used in all of our deployments.
Tom, I would tell you that we don't have enough staff time. We don't have enough staff availability to get all of the meters changed out in a timely manner. So I would suggest, if we're going to consider this, that we would have an installer come in and do that work.
Okay.
The other thing is, if you just, so just for Press's example, if you were to do one of the utilities, meaning electric, your ongoing cost does not change, correct?
So what we've done for the purposes of these examples is scaled the system, the software systems to meet your full needs at 100%. So, and that's to make the calculations just for comparisons easier. But you're correct. What we would charge on a monthly for the AMI program fees, which I'm sorry, the project and professional service fee line here is actually the number of devices installed in the field. So this would be, it would actually, as you deploy, that number would increase, and you wouldn't reach the full, that full fee until all of the system was deployed. All of the devices were deployed in the field.
Okay.
All right, Brandon, 100%.
So 100%, as you may have assumed, would be replacing all of the electric and water modules, along with the network gear and the installation that's associated with it. So for the 100%, the initial services cost would be $1.39 million. And then annually, we have the same annual cost as I mentioned, because we've scaled this on an ongoing basis to facilitate the entire population.
Brandon, if you could show the next page, which shows the comparison across all three.
Yep.
So this is, we put this together for you so you could see the different options, the scale of it, just side by side, outside of the cost. So these were the options that we were requested to put together for you. If you have some different thoughts about what you'd like for us to do quotes on, we can do that. Outside of that, this, if these, I just want to let you know that these aren't your only options, except for, the 100%. I mean, that is what it is. If you wanted to look at a different percentage than that, we could come up with something else. In addition to that, you've had the proposals with you, you've seen this. The next steps would be to get your thoughts about what, if you would like some different proposal ideas, if you would like us to begin putting a draft contract together, something for you to look at so that you could begin to opine on joining the program or not, because it all starts there with Board of Public Works choosing how you would like to move forward. DMEC would then move with drafting contracts for a contract between the Board of Public Works and DMEC, and then a contract between DMEC and AMP. Once we have those executed, then we can start placing orders for equipment and start scheduling out timelines.
Scott, I've seen presentations where they've also estimated the cost savings to the user, to the municipality in manpower and so forth. Have you done anything like that to determine how much it would be saving us in other costs for manpower?
Yes, well, we started working on that return on investment numbers. We had conducted some initial calculations working with Austin. We are still working on those, and we can get that to you.
Because the net cost is really important.
Yes.
Press, I'm on the exact same page as you. I mean, we have a lot of great ways to spend money with solar fields, with replacing pipes, water towers, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a very high bar from our perspective on making these kinds of investments. But what I would ask you to do when you look at the ROI, look at it obviously from the perspective of BPW, the business, but also look at it from the perspective of the customers and the benefits that they can gain and the savings that they may be able to generate as well.
So one of the questions, one of the things it brings up is that there's obviously a tremendous economy of scale between 25 and 100%. I mean, it's twice as expensive.
Right.
If the contract was let for 100%, but staged over 2-3 years, would the number be option 2 or option 3?
Brandon, how would you consider that if they wanted to go with option 3, but to go with a staged approach? How would you look at costs with that?
The cost ultimately would be option 3, because we have contracted prices with our suppliers for meters and hardware. So what you would order today would be the same price we would have at the end of our 10-year term. So the prices for meters themselves wouldn't change. To get into that calculation depends. The ultimate price depends on how you're financing it. Right? If you have to pay for the cost of money, then there's a cost that would have to be applied from one to the other as you move through that deployment. Then again, when you start to gain more return on investment, the sooner you have meters in the field. So there's a decision there on how you want to roll out a certain number of meters, because you can gain, the faster you roll things out, the quicker you can gain those returns, and that would offset some of your other financial decisions, like the initial investment. We understand it's significant. So
what's driving the cost difference? I mean, the twofold cost difference, is that all installation cost efficiencies, or I'm trying to understand?
The cost difference is equipment installation, and there are some of the professional service fees that are based on the number of units being deployed. So it's really driven by the cost of the units themselves and the cost to get them installed. That are the differences.
And just again, I know everybody got a chance to look at the proposals. There's an additional $227,000 in options, depending on which way the board would like to go, and the ongoing fees associated with those initial costs of $227,000 are up to $34,000. So you can get, the Kia, or you can get the Lamborghini, depending on, what you guys want. Same thing. The other side of it is, there is a portion that's not shown that would be NISC's portion of this. So there is a cost associated with the integration with NISC. It's not a huge cost when you're looking at the overall scope of this project, but just to keep in the back of your mind.
The other thing that I would ask for in addition to the ROI, again, based on us and the customers as well, is maybe a referral or a conversation with someone similar to our size that's done this and what they've actually seen as it relates to their results. And again, I'm not being overly critical. It's just that there's so many great ways for us to spend money. I want to make sure that we're doing the right due diligence.
We've got several other members of DMEC that they've done, you know, so I think we've got both Milford, we've got Seaford that, just, I'd like to let them have a little bit of time. I'm still anxious to see how much usage is taken from it. Understand the value of granularity on the system itself. That's what Tom has always, you know, really looked forward to on it. But I'd like to see those numbers myself.
Who's had it the longest in DMEC?
They're about the same, right, Brandon? The Seaford and Milford did about the same time?
They did. I think Milford technically contracted a month or two before Seaford.
And how long's that been?
That was in 2018. So they've had theirs up and running for.
So they have some good experience.
3 years.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's exactly what the town of Middletown and the City of Newcastle Municipal Services Commission did. They actually went and drove to Milford and got a full-on, no-holds-barred presentation from city staff about their experience with the program, their experience using the technology. So if that's something you'd like to do, it's right here in Delaware, and you can speak to them. You can speak to Middletown right now because they're right in the middle. They're getting equipment in right now. They're doing some network gear work right now, and they're doing getting meters in beginning of March. So you can speak to them to date about how it's going, and then at any point you want through the deployment of actual technology endpoints.
That'd probably be good to do.
Besides the granularity and being able to see how the distribution system, the other potential upside of this is time of day rate structuring to help us with shaving the peak, because it's such a significant portion of our electric costs, which the only way you can do that is with real-time meter.
Are we planning to, I have a question. Are we planning to, as a board, discuss this some more? Or is this really where our discussion is today? Or what are we looking at this for?
I think this is the beginning, Tom.
Okay, because I have some serious questions about it. I don't have any questions about the presentation. I just have any serious questions about us jumping into it.
Yep. I think we all do.
So this,
All right.
This is our beginning conversation with you. We wanted to just come in and have a discussion, present you what we can do, get your feedback of what I got 3 items right here on my list to come back with you with some information, and we can we'll definitely work with Darren and Austin on making sure that we have that information captured in a way that you want to see it, and we're at your pleasure for when you would like to deploy this.
The only thing I would add to the list potentially, if you've done this, is any surveys from end user customers and how they've responded to it, usage rates, how they've applied it, et cetera. Just trying to get both sides, both the customers as well as the BPW.
And could you explain, Mr. Webb, could you explain that a little bit? Surveys, just are you meaning by like asking customers who have had this at their this accessibility, what their feelings on it are, that kind of anecdotal feedback? Is that what you're looking for?
Any how they've used it, if they've used it, how it's benefited them. If these have already been done, that's great. If it's not, that's okay as well. But just trying to understand how the end user customer uses it, understands it, and what value they've seen from it.
The end user experience. Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah.
I'm saying
any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you very much. Brandon, Scott.
You're welcome.
We'll be.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Appreciate everything.
We'll be in touch with Brandon, Darren, excuse me, with Darren and Austin with about next steps. Thank you all for the time. Have a good night.
No, thank you.
Bye.
Yep, thank you.
All right. That brings us to old business, open forum, general discussion of approval of the proposed 2021, 2022 operations and maintenance budget. Darren.
President Lee, member of the board, we have shared the O&M budget with you. We're actually ahead of time by a month. The purpose of being ahead of time by that month is so that we can get a couple of things accomplished. Number one, we want to have the review of our rates with UFS, and they await this so that that can move forward quickly. And frankly, being ahead of time by just 1 month for our budget is not that big a deal. We should have been doing it all along. The other thing is that we're moving on additional staffing, and inside this budget holds the key to that, our budget reflects the additional staffing. And so it is my request. We've presented it to you 2 months ago. We've given it to you this month to look at it as again. I think that everything shows that we're going to be able to stay in the black. It's getting a little bit closer, but with everything that we've done, we are still financially sound, physically stable, and doing well. Any questions or comments on moving forward? And I would request that we approve this operation budget for the 2021-22 year.
I have just a quick question there. Did I understand you to say that the new potential employees are included in here?
Yes, they are.
Okay, good. That's all I needed.
So let me also clarify. We did our study with RKL, and we showed we had two couple of employees that were overpaid. We had a few that were right on the line, but we had several that were below. And we're going to take and correct that with this, and that is in this budget. Okay?
Good, yeah.
We're taking their recommendations, and that is included in this budget.
We put a lot of work into this, particularly on the issue on the beach side of the water system going forward. So great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd just like to point out that Darren's use of the word overpaid needs to be put in context, that there are reasons why those employees may be paid above a scale that are in the industry due to length of service and other factors. So I think we're still getting value from all of our staff at the current pay levels.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much.
I would agree with that. Darren, as it relates to the plan, is there anything that we've learned about, the installation of pipes over on the beach side that has any cause for a relook at those expenses, and how, if we're using the right technology as it relates to saltwater and some of these different pipes?
At this point in time, we've got that study going with GMB. We have gone to the state for a planning grant from them to help pay for 50% of that. So we're another month out from getting that moving forward, but I believe we'll be able to move that forward very quickly. We've got Charlie O'Donnell on the line if you want to have if you need to hear anything from him on that, but that's the crux of it. We're waiting for that to move forward, and then we'll be able to answer those questions very clearly. But I believe that this budget reflects what we need to do for the coming year.
Look, we always reserve the right to get smarter, and that may be a situation a year from now or 6 months from now where we need to make some changes, and we'll make those changes as appropriate.
Any other questions or discussion? If not,
just one other thing, President, I apologize. I did want to take a look at it, and I know it's part of my responsibility as well as treasurer. Take a look at the reserve policy and look at that. That's something that I will do. I think press and others may be involved in it as well. I want to make sure that it's being looked at the right way. Obviously, new eyes can take a look at different things, but I know there's been a lot of work that was put into it initially. but I would like to take a relook at that. That doesn't change this vote or what's happening, but it obviously is a part of some of the out of year conversations.
Thank you. I think it's a great idea because we've been using that for a number of years and we haven't checked it, but I think it's, and when we're talking to Dawn about our rate work, we could discuss it with her because her organization is the one that helped us develop it initially. So we could, as we move along, we get them into the conversation.
Great idea, Chris.
So do we have a motion on the budget?
I'll make a motion that the budget as proposed be accepted.
I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Darren. Great job.
Fantastic.
Item 11, open forum general discussion of the completion of the root cause analysis report for December 2019 wastewater treatment plant bypass. Tom, you've been working very hard on this and I think you finally brought it to a conclusion. Could you go over it with us?
Sure. I mean, everyone's had a chance to read it. I'll just go through the high level. So what this report does, or this letter memo does, is it went through all of the root causes and the corrective actions that we had in the original report and gives the current status and closure mechanism for them. And for those items that are still in process, they are now on Darren's project list so we can track them going forward. A lot of the resolution had to do with, bringing Infomart on board. Infomart has reviewed the initial root cause report and has made sure that they understand. And as we've brought them up to speed, it's been one of the things that Darren's used with them to make sure like their emergency response procedures and such are in accordance with preventing what happened in December. So unless you want me to go through line by line, I guess I just would open it up to questions.
I don't see a need for it, Tom. I mean, unless somebody has a particular question on an item. This root cause program that you put together has been going on for a year now, and that this document was originally prepared almost a year ago. So I think we've all gone through the items on here. You've just been checking them off as they're accomplished. So unless anyone has a discussion on a particular item, I just think
The one thing I would put up is that a lot of the continuing oversight, specifically the wastewater treatment plan, has to do with us using GMB and the quarterly walk downs, which Darren, I believe you're doing next week again.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm regularly going out to the plant also. So we keep our eyes on what's going on. And I think what's been shown up is, going through the monthly reports from Infomark, which are an order of magnitude better than anything in the past.
the thing that I think I've mentioned to you, Tom and Darren, I guess that the important thing is the regular checks that we have built into this thing. I mean, we have to make sure the quarterly and annual checkups, for some cases monthly, I guess, are done on a routine basis, and that a year from now or 5 years from now, we're still doing them. So we don't fall back to where we were. I think this whole report, I think, has brought us decades ahead from where we were. So I think it's an excellent document.
That was just it, the Darren capturing them on his project list.
Right.
So we need to keep it as part of our operating rhythm.
Yeah. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Tom, because you did the bulk of the work. And Austin, I shouldn't leave you out there. You were right there in the middle of it. So thanks for everybody. I think we've made a lot of progress in the past year.
Yes.
So any questions from the rest of the board?
Darren, is there any extra help that you need or to break through all these different initiatives? I know there's been a lot of great work done. Just asking if there's any help that you need outside of what you have.
I think we've got a lot of things calendared, and we definitely stay busy. Austin and I have plenty on our plates, but thank you very much for asking. That's a fantastic question. And we're staying efficient and very busy.
Okay, good. Congratulations.
I don't think we need a vote on this. I think we can accept it by consensus. I think everybody believes it's a great job. Okay, item 12, call to the public. Any questions out there?
We still have Nick Roth on.
Okay.
So just a warning, you're going to do the call to the press, but anybody in the on the panel or as attendees can definitely raise your hand. Charlie O'Donnell, can I ask you to simply hit the raise your hand button? You don't have to say anything. I just want to verify that it's working. Can you do that for me? It got raised. So he's out there.
All right.
So it's
Thanks,
working.
Charlie.
If anybody else wants to raise their hand, please do.
Now,
I see nothing.
okay. Item 13, call to the press. Nick, do you have anything for us?
Nick, you can talk if you take it off mute.
I'm good.
Okay. Thanks for staying with us.
No problem.
Okay. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
Let's hold on just 2 seconds, if I may.
I'm sorry.
I guess Laura just unmuted and muted again. Laura Oakley, if you want to raise your hand, do you want to say something? I just want to make sure we're not missing any of our
She's
public.
muted. She's muted right now.
If you want to say something, you can hit the raise your hand button. If not, we're going to just assume that was an accident. All right, I think we can move forward, Press.
Okay. So is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Move into executive session.
All in
So,
favor?
aye.
We're in executive session.
Hold on 2 seconds while people exit.
Okay.
All right, we've got everybody here, including the mayor.
Is the mayor still on?
Yes, he is.
Is there items that you have, Darren, that?
I don't believe I have any other items that we need
Okay.
to discuss at this time with the mayor present.
The mayor, I think Mike, we have some issues that you wanted to discuss, I believe. So, Mayor, if you would, I can let you go now.
Is there a need for me to come back?
No, there's no need. We're going to wrap this up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night. Night, John boy.